Hi, everyone. We'll give it another minute for the attendees to join. Great. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're very excited for everyone to be the first to see the results from our first-party data survey and to hear from our valued client, Wyndham. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping items. Please submit your questions for our presenters throughout the webinar by using the control panel on the right. If we're unable to get to your question, we'll follow up with you directly post-webinar. We'll also be sharing this presentation out afterward, and of course, all of our webinars can be found on the Sojern website. I would be remiss not to tell you about Sojern and why we conducted this survey with Benchmark Research Partners. Sojern's vision is to become the #1 travel marketing platform by helping hotel marketers like you drive production efficiently and build awareness and loyalty through our platform. With that in mind, we conducted this survey to understand how hotel leaders are using first-party data today and how they are thinking about this in the near future. Next slide. I'm Dawn Briggs, and I'm a Global Strategic Account Director at Sojern. I work with and support hotel marketers like all of you every day. One of the things I love about my job is partnering with intelligent, forward-thinking people like Jackie DiStasi from Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. I connected with Jackie and her team early on once we learned that Wyndham had onboarded Amperity, their new customer data platform at the time, in order to start the process of integrating and leveraging their first-party data to enhance campaign targeting and optimization. And finally, I'm going to introduce and turn it over to Josiah McKenzie of Benchmark Research Partners, who conducted this first-party data survey. Josiah helps our industry understand market changes and opportunities through peer benchmarking data. So without further ado, let's get into the results. Turning it over to you, Josiah.
Thank you, Don. Hello, everyone. I'm Josiah McKenzie, and I want to thank you for joining our live broadcast today. As Don said, we wanted to know how hoteliers today were using the data that they had from guest interactions to grow relationships with those guests and to attract new guests like them. So we conducted a research study on this topic, and I'm excited to share with you today what we found as part of that project. So let's first take a look at those who participated in this study for a little bit of context. If we could go to the next slide, we'll kind of give you a breakdown of who took part in this research project. Go to the next slide. There we go. So as you can see on the slide here, our study participants represented a mix of company types and sizes and included participants from leading hotel brands across North America, Europe, and Asia. And if we go to the next slide, you can see that our study participants also held a wide variety of roles. But most commonly were the marketing and commercial leaders responsible for using first-party data for advertising within their respective companies. So with that said, let's jump into what we learned from this study. The first finding we had was really an indication of the adoption of first-party data use within hospitality today. And we've been talking about first-party data as an industry for a while now in hospitality. And today we found, as part of our research, that most hotels have implemented a strategy around this. This was even more common the larger the company that was participating in the study. One told me that using first-party data was just table stakes for marketing today. If we go to the next slide, we also asked those who did not build or hadn't had a first-party data strategy yet if they wanted to create one. And overwhelmingly, they said yes. You can see about 3/4 of respondents without a first-party data strategy today did want to build build one. 18% weren't sure, 7% skipped that question, but we're in this environment today where majority of hotel brands do have a first-party data strategy. Those that don't want to build one and are actively in the process of getting ready to do that. Why is this, right? If we go to the next slide, what we found as part of the research is that most believe first-party data is very important to their digital marketing today. So, they believe it's important. Those who have built a first-party data strategy rely heavily on it. And as you can see here, most are saying that it is very important. If we go to the next slide, we can take a look at why hoteliers have built a first-party data strategy. The top reasons that they built the strategy were to maximize campaign performance, with 74% of respondents saying they built their first-party data strategy to do so. If I looked a little bit further into the data, I found those with the largest marketing budgets, $1 million or more, were even more likely to build for this reason. It makes sense, right? If you are spending a lot of money on your campaigns, you want to kind of think about how you can optimize those and get the edge. So about 3/4 overall, and the bigger the company, the more this became a reason for building a first-party data strategy. Other reasons were to build stronger customer relationships and to maximize overall revenue growth. What I found interesting is the reasons that people said they built their first-party data programs were also the most common benefits they experienced, and even more reported getting some of these benefits than said that they set out to build their program for these. So 86% said using first-party data was effective at maximizing revenue growth. 75% said it was effective for maximizing campaign performance. And just kind of to double click on this data point here, we found that brands participating in the study were even more likely to say first-party data was effective for them in maximizing campaign performance. And then finally, 68% said it was effective for building stronger customer relationships. So this is really interesting. People are starting out with these objectives. It's also what first-party data programs are delivering for these brands. If we go to the next slide, we kind of followed up with this line of questioning to understand a little bit more about the direct impact of first-party data on revenue and on guest satisfaction, of course, which are two hallmarks of effective hospitality, right? So we found here that 81% of respondents did see a lift in revenue at the hotels where they had implemented a first-party data strategy, which is very encouraging if you have a program in place or you're thinking of building one. And also interestingly, a little more than half said they were also seeing a lift in guest satisfaction. So this is the holy grail, right? Making money, making guests happy. And we have indications here that first-party data is delivering this for hoteliers today. If I kind of cut the data a little bit further and found actually that the largest companies participating in the study were actually even more likely to have seen a lift in revenue, but they're also a little less likely to see a lift in guest satisfaction, which doesn't surprise me a ton. Large brands are difficult to maintain satisfaction overall. So seeing the lift in revenue, this was a clear benefit that we were seeing for respondents, and even more so for the bigger the brand that was participating. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into where first-party data is being used today. If we could go to the next slide, we found that first-party data was most commonly used top of funnel, right? So it was used by many respondents to re-engage former guests, get people to come back to their hotels, but it was even more likely to be used for engaging likely new guests, right? So lookalike prospecting, with 80% of respondents saying that they were using it for that. And you can see here it's also used, but to a lesser degree, for bottom of funnel campaigns for improving conversion rate and upselling campaigns. We found the larger brands participating in the study were even more likely to use first-party data in top-of-funnel campaigns, and they were also more likely to use it in lookalike prospecting. Every large brand participating in the study said they were doing lookalike prospecting. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you a little bit about how campaigns were measured. And so the two top metrics that respondents said that they were using to measure the value of their use of first-party data were conversion rates and return on ad spend. But you can also see here click-through rate, cost per acquisition, views and impressions were also used by some to measure the impact. I didn't see a big difference between large and small companies in the use of metrics, except for the fact that smaller hotel companies were actually half as likely to be tracking cost per acquisition or customer lifetime value. And that might be some smaller companies or brands may lack some of the sophisticated tracking to measure that. But by and large, these were pretty consistent across all of our respondents. If we go to the next slide, any conversation about data for hotel marketing really needs to include security considerations. And that's really true, though, for any and every area of hospitality today. Compared to other uses of data in hospitality, many respondents in our study said that using first-party data in their marketing does not create significant risk for their companies. So I think this is somewhat relative. I did see that larger companies, the larger the company was, the more likely they were to say that there were risk considerations. So I think the takeaway here is that security and thinking about how to mitigate risk is certainly something to think about, but it shouldn't be something holding back from thinking about how to use first-party data as part of your overall strategy because of the benefits that we've looked at. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you some of the challenges hoteliers are facing when it comes to first-party data. Top of the list was collecting the data, right? So you can't use something you don't have, right? So you need to collect this data before you can use it. We also found that technology was also a common challenge, which is really critical for benefiting or getting benefits from first-party data as part of your program. We found for the larger groups, collecting data was somewhat more challenging, but for the smaller groups that participated, talent and kind of people to manage these programs was also a significant challenge. That became a little bit bigger of a deal for some of the smaller brands out there. So how do hoteliers overcome this, right? So there's some challenges kind of inherent to using first-party data. How do they overcome this? Well, if we go to the next slide, you can see here that hoteliers are really relying on hotel tech companies and digital marketing specialists to overcome some of those challenges that we looked at. We looked on previous slides, the use of first-party data has a lot of benefits. There's a lot of good things to look forward to, but there are challenges there. And what I found is that hoteliers today are most commonly working with hotel technology companies like Sojern, which can provide both technology expertise and industry knowledge on the best way to use the data and technology in the context of hospitality. So those best-in-class guidance combined with case studies and experience working across so many brands, I believe is why so many hoteliers are turning to companies like Sojern to overcome challenges, to plan their programs. You do see some working with non-industry tech companies like Google, but kind of by and large, the most common was to work with industry specialists. If we go to the next slide here, I think one of the things that we were trying to dig into with this data was to understand how hoteliers were getting an edge, right? Where does the competitive advantage lie with first-party data? And so I asked those who said that they were effective at competing with OTAs and other hotel brands what they were doing differently. And what I found is that the ones that said that they were effective in getting that competitive edge are actually 2 times as likely to have worked with tech companies in building their first party data strategy. So, you know, referencing that prior slide, working with a company like Sojern is not only a very common thing for hotel brands, but it seems in my research to be more correlated with saying that you have a competitive advantage as well. So something to think about as kind of you're planning your program and how to use first party data here. And then if we could go to the next slide, I guess just to kind of summarize what we found in our study overall, I would say it really comes back to building stronger customer relationships, right? So strong relationships are really what hospitality is all about, right? And a consistent theme in the findings from the study was that first-party data plays a vital role in supporting relationship building, right? So it's the top reason hoteliers are building first-party data strategies today. That's why 2/3 of respondents are doing it. Most of the respondents in the study said that it is effective in helping them build stronger relationships, right? So it's actually delivering on the promise of what people are building. And then it's also helping them find new guests that are likely to be a good fit and a profitable fit for their brand. And so, yeah, it really all comes down to building relationships. I know we talk about that a lot in the hotel industry, but hotels and hotel brands, hotel companies are also businesses. They need to make money. And so I'm always interested in where you see evidence of kind of achieving both of these results. And if we think back to that earlier finding, vast majority of hotel brands that have implemented a program like this are seeing that revenue outperformance. They're seeing happier guests, and they're saying that this is really vital for building stronger relationships. So I hope you found this interesting. We'll make these slides available after this broadcast, but that's all I have for now. So to explore some of these concepts in a little more depth, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Don.
Thank you, Josiah. Great presentation, and I know it inspired me to ask a lot of questions. And if you all have questions as well, please do submit them through the control panel. At this time, I would like to reintroduce Jackie DiStasi, Senior Director of Analytics and Optimization at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. I had the pleasure of meeting Jackie a little over a year ago. She and her team worked closely with us to get started with a lot of what you heard today, leveraging and integrating first-party data to inform, optimize, and just all around improve campaign results with Sojern specifically. Jackie, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, I'm happy to be here.
Great, great. So we'll start with a more high-level question. We've heard the results. Just curious what you thought of the overall survey, what aligned with Wyndham's approach and strategy, maybe what is not aligned. Just give us your high level, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry about that. So yeah, I think that the findings are really interesting. And I think even just a few years ago, people really were not thinking about first party data the way that they do today. And I think that's probably due to a number of factors. And, we have GDPR and CCPA just becoming more part of the ether, and things that we need to think about, and data security and privacy is really important. But certainly the deprecation of third-party cookies, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, has sort of exacerbated that need, right? Thinking about what are we going to do when this goes away? How are we going to maintain our existing infrastructure and make sure that our marketing can live on past any changes from Google or any other big vendor? And so it's really, really important that people are thinking about first-party data. So it's exciting to see that more and more people are understanding the value and the benefits that that brings to the table.
Awesome, great. And aside from the obvious, which you mentioned, cookies going away, was there anything else at Wyndham that really inspired and made you think about, where the industry is heading to actually take steps to integrate a CDP, for example?
Sure. I mean, so Wyndham invested very early in CDPs. So pre-pandemic, back in 2020, we kicked off with Imparity. So really been leveraging it for a long time now. And really at the time, I think understanding the general need, not just around the cookie deprecation, because that was certainly part of the conversation back then, but also just around data privacy and the changes that we're seeing and the number of pieces of legislation that are coming up and things that we need to think about and just make sure that we're in a position to be extremely agile with. And so making sure that we weren't heavily relying on third-party data as the basis for our marketing strategy, which was really important. And so making sure that we had the infrastructure and the tools to do that is something we invested in. And we're glad that we made that shift because we were ahead of the curve there. And it really, I think, helped us secure our marketing strategy moving forward.
You certainly were. So when you think about the specific data that we've been talking about, was there anything that really kind of bubbled up as far as wanting to leverage first and foremost?
Wanting to leverage in terms of the data in the CDP?
Yes, the specific data.
Sure. So, we really started with the foundation, and I would recommend that anyone do that. Think about what are the core tenets of what your consumers are engaging with you in, where are those key pieces of data living, and making sure that you're trying to stitch those things together to create that unified view of the guest. And so for us, that comes down to, basic reservation and stay data, like did they make a booking? Did they depart? When did they do those things? Raw clickstream data from our website, data around our emails from Salesforce Marketing Cloud, a lot of different places. And then, of course, when people think about CDPs, I think they really solely think about first-party data, but it's more than that. The unification of the data should be predicated in first-party because that's where you're getting that value of using your own data and making sure that you're secure. But certainly bringing in and stitching additional data to that to help enrich that is also a big part of it as well. So we certainly can use third-party data to enrich our first-party view to understand who that person may be for data sets that we don't necessarily collect internally. So not just, did they depart with us, but maybe what types of things are they interested in? Where do they like to travel? The basic information that you can purchase from any third-party provider that is really interesting and definitely part of the conversation as well.
Those are some really good points. So it actually makes me think about measurement, right? And that's a big part of what you do in your role. Just kind of curious, I think we saw in the survey results that while a lot of this type of marketing approach is used at the upper funnel, oftentimes it's lower funnel metrics and KPIs that are looked at. How does Wyndham approach essentially valuation of your investment?
Yeah, I mean, so it needs to be both, in my opinion. So it's not enough to just fill the funnel. You also have to optimize the bottom, and it's not just enough to optimize the bottom. You have to fill the top. And so it's really working hand in hand in partnership, not just with my group and analytics, but also with our media teams to make sure that we're all aligned and in lockstep in how we sort of deploy those funds, where we optimize. But it really should be both. Now, why people tend to focus on the lower funnel isn't super surprising. It is the easiest to quantify. And so in an area that is super new, right? CDPs are very, very new in terms of technology, and things are constantly changing and evolving. So it's not surprising to me that people sort of lean into what is easiest to do. But I think it's also really important to be aware of the new trends, what's out there, and what are the ways that we potentially could quantify things in the future, and really look to make sure that we're aligning our business strategies to those new technologies.
Great, great. So I'd like to take a step back because it came up a couple of times earlier in our discussion, but also in Josiah's presentation. When it comes to privacy, we understand obviously that today's consumer is obviously expecting more personalization, et cetera. Just kind of curious what the conversation was like inside of Wyndham when it came to balancing privacy and security concerns with the more optimal sort of customer and user experience. Can you share on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, a partnership with legal is extremely important with, both just traditional legal, info security, privacy, all of that is part of the conversation. And so we do not do anything without making sure we're in lockstep with that group, which is really important. I did see in the survey that some people felt maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Make sure that you're focusing on privacy. It's super, super important. But certainly we need to make sure that we're doing everything in a best practice sort of way. But also we don't want to make things creepy either. Even if we can do something, should we? And I think that's part of the conversation. People certainly want curated experiences. I think they're starting to expect that. It's becoming table stakes, not just in the hospitality industry, but just across all industries. But you also want to make sure that people sort of understand why it is that they're being targeted for something, or how their data sort of came into being that made it part of the conversation. And so, you don't want to be creepy about it. You don't want to send somebody an email for a product that they never gave their email address for. Then they start to think, well, how did you even get my contact information? And we don't want to go down that path. Make sure that we are speaking to people who want to be spoken to. We're meeting people where they are, but we're also being really conscious of data security and privacy.
That's awesome. So thinking about Amperity specifically, obviously I'm quite familiar with them and having worked with you and through them for the last year or so. They are obviously what I would call a pure play customer data platform, or CDP, but there are a lot of other companies out there, names we all know, whether it be Salesforce or Adobe or even LiveRamp, who are kind of playing in the same space. What made Wyndham decide to go with more of this, pure play CDP in Amperity versus another partner that you may have already been working with?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Amperity was really ahead of its time, I think, when we invested, and they've continued to make incredible gains around identity resolution. And that's something we really wanted to get right. I think CDPs can play in so many different spaces, and the term CDP is very broad. So some CDPs offer totally different technology than others. And so it's really important to understand what is the goal of your business and what are you getting with the tool that you have. But for us, identity resolution is top of mind, and that's something that Amperity really, really does very well. And understanding, who our guest is and making sure that we're not just using deterministic matching, right? Something that Amperity does differently than other CDPs is they also leverage probabilistic matching. And so it's, highly scientific in the way that they approach it, but it is incredibly valuable to be able to stitch connections in ways that some other tools maybe can't. And so that is something that we've really leaned into and that we really loved about the tool.
That's great. And I just got thinking, you mentioned sort of the holy grail, of course, is ensuring that you start with the goal of your business and then figuring out how to use data to achieve those goals. Have there been any instances where it worked backward, where the data kind of said, wow, we really should be thinking about X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely times where data helps to inform strategy. It really should be both ways, in my opinion, right? You have people like proactively looking at data and understanding what those trends are and where maybe we could look or what's available. Because a lot of times the analytics groups, the marketing groups don't partner enough. And I think it's really important that you do, because the people looking at the data, they have an idea that the marketing team may not even realize is an option because they don't know it's there. And so it's really important to stay tightly locked in with your marketing groups and make sure everyone's clear on what data exists and what's possible past what exists, right? Okay, so this is what we have. Can we build on that to build something new? And really have that strategic conversation be cross-functional, so that way you can get the benefits of both sides and then the insight from both teams.
That's great. And I know personally, having been in this business a while, it's been really refreshing to have access to analytics teams, and it's inspired some really, interesting and high-level conversations. So thank you for that.
Sure.
What would you say the number one challenges that you have, essentially encountered as you've been, taking this journey since,
Sure.
The first day that, someone just said, wow, we really need to, be one of the first hotel chains to adopt a CDP?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's challenging in general, right? Like, it is a new space. And I think that's what people forget is there's no one perfect answer, and it's going to keep changing. And so I think it's really important when you approach this to know that it's going to evolve and to make sure whatever strategy you're putting in place has the ability to be agile and sort of change and move with the industry, because it's going to change. And so in terms of challenges, we've had all kinds of challenges, right? Not just what data should we bring in? Okay, now we're bringing it in. Is it difficult to bring in? How do we stitch this? Every piece of the the flow is going to encounter some sort of struggle, but I think that that's part of the process. That's what helps you grow and learn. And I think it's really important just to recognize that you're always going to hit roadblocks. And so making sure you have the right partners in place to help remove those is paramount. So, you know, like I said, we work very closely with marketing, we work closely with legal, we work closely with leadership to make sure everyone understands what it is that they're going to get and how we're going to approach it. And that thought partnership and leadership, it really helps us to overcome the challenges that we've had.
So if there's one piece of advice you could give to the industry, what would that be?
Make friends with legal. Make sure that you are totally tightly in lockstep and that, you know, they are people too. When you have questions, they're here to help problem solve. Okay, you can't do this thing, but like, have you thought about this? They may be able to produce information that will help jar something in your brain to say, oh, I could think about this differently. Maybe this is a way that we could sort of get to the same end goal while still making sure we're following all the rules that we need to follow. And so really just partnering with the teams that you work with, I think is so important. And it's something that I think Wyndham does really well in general. And part of that is because we run really lean teams. So everybody by necessity is in a lot of these conversations. And where in maybe other organizations, they don't necessarily get the opportunity to hear all of these strategic conversations. And I think that really close-knit partnership helps us a lot.
Well, I can certainly attest to that. I just watched a video where your CMO, Lisa, was presenting at Adweek or one of the industry events with, I think it was your CFO, and it was a whole discussion around how closely the teams work together. So you're definitely putting your money where your mouth is.
Yes.
So the last question that I have for you is, you know, given all of this, you know, are there any, and obviously Google has postponed the, you know, the deprecation of cookie timeline that we've all been working toward for the last couple of years. But are there any trends outside of that that you're really watching out for that you see playing specifically into this this function of leveraging and integrating first-party data?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really understanding what do consumers want, how do they want to be spoken to, and just being aware of emerging trends, right? Like, you know, I think the last 10 years we've been thinking about, okay, like, you know, millennials, that's who's traveling. And that's not the case anymore. Like, yes, millennials are traveling, but we have a whole new generation coming up behind us that want to and need to be spoken to differently. And so understanding what people's wants are really helps inform not just how we're going, what we're going to do, but how we're going to approach it, which I think is really important. So just staying on top of just generational trends in the future as you know, the industry grows. And then certainly, of course, the privacy piece, just things are coming out all the time, not just for big initiatives like GDPR, but certainly legislation at the state level, at the federal level is continuing to be pitched. And so it's really important just to make sure you're on top of what those things could look like in the future to make sure you're complying.
Excellent. Well, Jackie, thank you so much. This was invaluable to have this conversation with you. That's unfortunately about the time we have for today. And I know it's a super busy week for everyone post-holiday. So just wanted to say thank you to both Jackie and to Josiah for joining us and sharing their perspective today. And we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day and evening. So thank you.
Thank you.